Morning, folks. How you doing today? Today, we're going to have a very interesting discussion. Yeah, very interesting discussion today. This series is Narcissism as a Network. And this part of the whole series is Narcissism Network, but I'm doing also a series just on Tupac, right? And the series of Tupac was an actor. He was an actor that got lost in his character, right? Why? Because he didn't have the right coaches around him. And he began to live the life of Tupac the gangster when he really wasn't a gangster. He was a poet. He was really an actor. He was really an artist. And he played such a magnificent gangster. I mean, he was so effective. He was so effective that if you go look in the Wax Museum of Tupac in New York, and you'll see the Wax Museum portrayed Tupac as the character, the gangster, his role, not him as Tupac the artist who played the gangster. Right? Tupac's never carried guns. Tupac never blasted at anybody. And I think besides himself, I'm not sure if Tupac was ever around any shooting, attempted killing, or murders. I mean, he was just an actor playing a gangster. But I don't think he was ever involved in the grimy work of gangsterism and things like that. He was pretending. And the problem is that he got caught up looking and interacting and engaging with what? Real gangsters. On the East Coast, it was more Tupac. It was more Puffy and carrying guns, and would give his girl the pistol to carry the gun into the club, whereas he's the only one with the gun. He goes from there in the attempted murders over to West Coast. And in the West Coast, he engages with another sociopath who's currently in jail. And Tupac couldn't understand what was happening to him. From all of his videos and all his videos and things like that, he started saying things like, basically, this place doesn't work the way I thought it would. Right? That's because Tupac had no idea he crossed the line. He had no idea he was someplace he never should have been in the first place. That is, mainly in somebody else's world. Right? And he went into the world of a character he made. And that's why everything turned out the way it did for him. So this series on Tupac is a narcissism network, that when you're in front of that one sick narc, that awful, sick, disgusting piece of you-know-what, they're only a vessel, a node on a network that you do not want to get engulfed in. These people unalive you. That's all they do. Create turmoil, chaos, emotional, psychological pain. That's all they do. So you want to make sure you sort of understand that when you're in front of that narcissist, you're actually dealing with a network, right? Now, this episode, part 7, is Tupac and his shadow. Oh my God. Wow. Tupac never understood the concept of a shadow, and I'm going to try to help you understand what it means also. And because Tupac never understood the concept of a shadow, he never understood that he was always giving his enemies his secrets and all the things that they need to stab him directly in the back and get away with it. I mean, Tupac, because he didn't understand his shadow, left himself vulnerable to everyone around him. And despite all the things that's going on, remember, he was the only one who died. Everyone else went along their way, right? The people who were involved became billionaires, and those who were around, they all stayed silent. But no one jumped up. No one spoke up for him. So how did Tupac tell his enemies everything they needed to unalive him, right? In order to help you understand that, I'm gonna have to go back. Go back. Okay, here's a concept I want you to remember. This concept says that you never attach to the temporary, right? Because if you attach to the temporary, then when it's no longer there, that attachment creates trauma. I mean, trauma for you when you're out the attachment. And then when attachment is no longer there, the person incessantly and compulsively need to get reunification with that object, right? All right. So you never want to, let's say, be in a relationship with a person who's not always there. As they come is good. As they go, you go, so goes attachment and all the other issues, right? So the temporary, never attach to the temporary. I mean, if this is a temporary relationship, don't attach to it. Only attach to the permanent, the things that don't move. At least attach to the things that have a lifespan significantly longer than yours. Now that's stability because you stay alone to that, it's never going to move. Right? So remember, stay away from the temporary. Don't attach to the temporary, attach to the permanent. And so what I'm going to do is I'm trying to give you some advice and I'm trying to help you understand how important this advice is. This advice is. So I'm not going to give you something temporary, right? Something that's good for the political moment or what's good for the whatever is going on. I'm not going to give you that advice for whatever good's going on, what's good for the moment. I'm going to give you the advice that's good, period. No matter where you at or what environment you're in, it's still going to be the same. Yeah. And so I'm gonna help you understand the concept. Now, in order for me to get this concept up to you, I have to read directly this is from Walter's appeal and Garnett's address to the slaves of the United States of America. Yes, look at this. Look at this. I'm reading through slave literature, right? Reading through slave literature. And what do? They describe a narc, right? They describe narcissism, right? It was just awful, right? And the way they describe these people is the same way I'm describing them now. It's the same way Jesus described them in the Bible, right? And so this coming from like the turn of the 19th century. And let me give you a storyline of what happens. In this story, okay, there's a slave owner and like a slave driver with an assistant, and they are transporting a group of slaves in like a wagon. And they were very cruel and very mean and sadistic to these slaves, right? Okay, and they were shopping them around like animals to be shown on display or to do work. Anything they needed to have done, they'll go ahead and just use their slaves for, right? Now, so here's the point. One day, something happens and the slaves revolted. The slave revolted and they went to kill the handler, I guess the guy who was driving and his assistant and stuff like that. And they killed them and now they're about to go in and kill the slave master, the owner, right? And they get them really good, right? And leave them for dead, right? Hey, Mohammed, how's it going, buddy? And leave them from dead. However, the slaves that they were with, one of them went back, defied everybody, went and helped the slave master on his horse and helped him get away, right? And when the slave master got back to town or whatever, then they rounded up a posse and they came and they actually executed everybody. And I believe the slave that told him got the rewards, right? And so remember, narcissism is a network, right? Tupac believed that the people around him had his back and they didn't. in this case, in this story here, you have slaves being transported, and then there's a slave revolt. And the slaves that revolted, that finally got their freedom, never would have thought that one of their own would have turned them in, even though all of them were free. So all of them were free. Instead of running away free, that slave, that one slave with them, went back and told on everybody and then got everybody killed, but they lived. Right? This is narcissism in the network. Listen, anytime you are doing anything, the narcissist will, with psychopaths, narcissists, I don't know if it's psychopaths and sociopath, they may not be too engaged with you. They like loners, you know. Narcissists are like lions, like to stay in group, and they want to be the alpha to sort of control the reality of the group and stuff. So they really push to be the alpha of a group. And psychopaths and sociopaths are more like cheetahs or panthers. They by themselves, they stalk, and if they quiet, and they certainly not going to be hanging out with each other. Right. So here, I want to see if I can. I want to see if I can. Oh, I think I found it. Read it. Read it for you. Okay. I gotta get my microphone and stuff, all that. Okay, just bear with me while I read this. Okay, this is called Affray and Murder, and this is from Portsmouth, Ohio, August 22nd, 1829. See, this is, let me show you the date on here. August 22nd, 1829. Oh, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? Look at that. Yeah, okay. 1829. And this is useful because they're describing back then eloquently everything that I'm saying right now. And how this applies. Crabs in the barrel. Every time you try to make a goal, every time you try to improve yourself, every time they see you making this change, they will sacrifice their own lives just to cut you off at the feet, at the knees. They will do that to you. And here's an example of it. And that's one of the things you have to learn. And this will be your parents, your mother, father. All right. This would be your spouse. I mean, your sister and brother. And these are the people who are creating 90% of the stuff in your life. Right? So let me just read this. This is from 1892. Remember, hold on to the things that's stable. And stable means the interpretation. The people they're describing here is the same as the ones I'm describing in my Narcissism and Network. So this doesn't change. It's a stable component in humanity. And these sick people represent the bottom of the pile. There has to be a bottom somewhere. Right? Okay, here. The most shocking outrage was committed in Kentucky, about 8 miles from this place, on the 14th-ish. A Negro driver by the name of Gordon, who was purchased in Maryland about a Negro driver by the name Gordon, who was purchased in Maryland, about 60 Negroes, was taking them, assisted by an associate named Allen, and a wagon goer who conveyed the baggage to the Mississippi. The men were handcuffed and chained together in the usual manner for driving these poor wretches. That's how they're describing the black men, the slaves. While women and children were suffered to proceed without encumbrance. I think they were able to ride on the things, whereas the males walked. It appeared that by means of a file of Negroes unobserved that succeeded in separating the irons which bound their hands in such a way as to be able to throw them off at any moment. About 8 o'clock in the morning, while proceeding on the state road leading from Greenup to Vanceboro, 2 of them dropped their shackles and commenced a fight. When the wagoner, that is Petite, rushed in with his whip to compel them to desist. You see how the language is even written in a formal language, and these are a bunch of the. You see the language even used as a way to sort of disenable, make it seem as if this is valid, and make it seem as the person who's writing the article in 1892, he's framing this in ways that's very sadistic. I mean, he's calling them wretches, and they don't have rights, right? Um, So two of them dropped their shackles and commenced a fight when the wagoner Petite rushed in with his whip to compel them to desist. At this moment, every Negro was found to be perfectly at liberty. Perfectly at liberty. It tells you more about the people who read the audience this guy is writing for, too. And one of them seized the club, gave Petite a blow on the head, and laid him dead at his feet. And Allen, who came to his assistance, met a similar fate from the contents of a pistol fired from another of the gang. Gordon was then attacked, seized, and held by one of the Negroes, while another fired twice at him with a pistol, the ball of which each time grazed his head, but not proving effectual. He was beaten with clubs and left for dead. They then commenced pillaging the wagon, and with an axe split open the trunk of Gordon and rifled it of money, about $2,490 back there in 1829. 16 of the Negroes then took to the woods. Gordon, in the meantime, not being materially injured, was enabled by an assistant of one of the women. So Gordon, they didn't take out Gordon. So Gordon got some assistance from one of the women to mount his horse and flee. So one of the women helped him on his horse and flee. Pursued, however, by one of the gang on another horse with a drawn pistol. Fortunately, he escaped with his life, barely arriving at the plantation as the Negro came in sight, who then turned about and retreated. The neighborhood was immediately rallied and a hot pursuit given, which we understand has resulted in the capture of the whole gang and the recovery of the greatest part of the money. 7 of the Negro men and 1 woman, it is said, were engaged in the murder and will be brought to trial at the next court in Greensboro. Here, my brethren, I want you to, that's the end of the article, right? But the article is inside the chapter. This guy is using the article to express his feelings about the characters of the story. Okay, now this is the author talking now in his narrative here. Here, my brethren, I want you to notice, particularly in the above article, the ignorant and deceitful actions of this colored woman. He said ignorant and deceitful action. I beg you to view it carefully as for eternity. So he said, hey, you need to look at this lady's behavior. I mean, forever, you need to focus on this, right? Here, a notorious wretch with 2 other Confederates had 60 of them in the gang, driving them like brutes. The men, all in chains and handcuffs, and by the help of God, they got their chains and handcuffs thrown off and caught 2 of the wretches and put them to death, and beat the other until they thought he was dead and left him for dead. However, he deceived them, and rising from the ground, this servile woman. I had to look that up. What is servile? I had to look this up. And look at this. And then they use words that I had to learn, but the words are very particular. So he described this woman as servile. Okay, define define servile. Let me see here. It's a particular word. Look at it. It's very interesting. Okay. The word servile is an adjective that describes someone or something characterized by, look, excessive submissiveness, obedience, or lack of independence, often in a way that is considered demeaning or overly differential. Remember, go back, go back in the um, my series on narcissism and network when I say that how narcissists try to use you, want to use you as a mirror. This slave woman was a mirror for the narc who unalived her. And she didn't have any independent thought. She was simply carrying out the reflections of her master, that is the one that unalived her, right? Now, this is the same relationship that exists now between that narc and the narc that unalived the narc in front of you. You're not in a relationship with this person. You're in a relationship with either their mother or their father or some other narc, but you're not in a relationship with them. They can only do what their higher narc told them, like in this. In servile, so when I say that these people are servile to the higher narc, that means that they can abandon you at any moment. They don't have any loyalty to you or what you're doing. That's what I was trying. That's what I was, the point I was trying to make with Tupac. Even in New York, when the people where they attempted to kill him while he's in a group of his friends, no one actually said anything, right? They're not going to get involved in that. It's just for social media. It's, right, you know, they're not going to involve in that. Then he went to California, same thing. He's killed around a group of people and nobody responded, no one interacts, right? Why? Because those people who are unconscious are all collectively getting orders from people who are not there. And those people who are not there didn't tell them to get involved in Tupac stuff. Does that make sense? So look, excessively submissiveness, obedience, and lack of independence, right? Often is character considered demeaning or overtly differential. I mean, they prefer them or not. So it was clear what she would do. She didn't care about any of those peoples or their lives. She only cared about reflecting the gratitude, that trying to get the gratitude that her master or the narc that unalived her was giving her. Let me go on to read. However, he deceived them, and rising from the ground, this servile woman helped him upon his horse and made his escape. Brethren, what do you think of this? What is it? What was it the natural fine feelings of this woman to save such a wretched alive? I mean, was it her fine feelings that made her save this guy who was trading her and everybody else as slave? I know that I know that the blacks take them half enlightened and ignorant are more humane and merciful than their most enlightened and refined European that can be found on all the earth. They're going in back there. They're going in. So let no one say that I assert this because I am prejudiced on the side of my color and against the other Europeans. For what I write, I do it candidly for my God and the good of both parties. Natural observation has taught me these things. There is a solemn awe in the hearts of black folks as it respects murdering men. There is a natural observation, there is a solemn awe in the hearts of blacks as it respects to murdering men. Um, um, and I think that's the point. I think that's the point I want to make. Here's 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 the here's the point. Okay, let's go back to this story. Okay, how does this apply to Tupac and his shadow? Okay, remember the slaves who attempted to get the revolt and then finally got their freedom. They had no idea. They had no idea that that action had a shadow, and there's no way that it could have turned out beneficial for them. Why? Because the woman who seemed to be interested in the gain that she would get from reporting this and helping the community restore balance, she would get rewarded for this, right? And so the Tupac never understood his shadow, and the shadow are all the avenues that people can take behind your back that will target you that you cannot stop, right? So you can't stop. So if you do something, it's going to be undone. It's going to be undone because people access you through your shadow. So, for example, these gentlemen wanted to escape, but the shadow was getting the gentleman back to his support group. And then that led to a rebellion. They eventually, all of them were hung, hung for that. That makes sense. And so that's the shadow there. And so Tupac never understood his shadow. So, for example, if you want the tip of your tree to reach the heavens, then that means that the root system is going to have to reach down to hell. That root system is the shadow. I mean, every object has a shadow, meaning there's a good side to whatever this activity is, and then there's a bad side, right? Remember the saying that says you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Well, that's the reality that he uploaded. And so he only focused on the live by the sword part. But when he started living by the sword, he created the die by the sword. And so he didn't understand what he was doing. He didn't understand his shadow. So, for example, what do I mean? There's consequences for every behavior. I mean, absolutely every behavior. If you do good things, like restorative things, like get some really good rest every day, the consequence is you're going to likely feel better than everybody. You're going to likely be able to perform better than everybody, all those things. However, if you didn't get any sleep, only a few hours sleep a night, then you're going to get consequences for that also. There's nothing that you can do that won't have any consequences. That's why this entire ecosystem is balanced. Because when I take from the system, that means I gain, but someone else loses. Right? That's how this thing works. And so if Tupac wanted to present himself, if Tupac was an artist, and after he was shot and damaged, he was locked into his lower self, and he became locked into the role of the gangster. And when he began pushing that envelope, then that's when you create the duality. So when he started sending out death threats and talking about I'm doing this to your wife and you got sickle cell and things like that, when he started to push that out there, the end result when it swung around was yes, the people are going to do that to him. And he had no idea that this was going to happen. He had no way to prepare for this. So remember here, Tupac, um, um, he was an actor and he was playing a role as a gangster. He didn't understand what his shadow was or how it worked. So when he began putting out stuff that's very violent and different and violent and dangerous and humiliating for people to listen to, can you imagine being the children of some of these people where Tupac was saying you're talking about their children don't grow? It's awful. And how did it come back on him? Yeah, came back that way. That's the shadow. Now, here's a certain what is the shadow? Okay, let me tell you what the shadow is. Uh, so when you go through life, you have things that you can't handle. So they're too much for you. Abuse, right? Trauma. You can't handle it, so you push it out of the way. You push everything out the way so you can go on, so you don't have to handle it. You don't have to deal with it. But it doesn't go away. it simply manifests itself in another part of your life that you can't understand, that you can't see it. So imagine it starts to come out in your world, right? So let me give you an example of, let's say, sexual repression, right? Let's say a teenage boy, right? A teenage boy, sexual repression. So he wants to engage, he wants to engage, he wants to engage. His body is saying he's engaged, but he doesn't have any partners, right? But that you can tell is growing and growing and growing. So what does he start to do? He started to view the objects around him as sex objects. All the women become sex objects. The objects become sex objects. The media becomes sex objects and stuff like that. And so he's colored, so he's not able to deal with the not having access to the intimacy he wants to, or that. And so he projects it out there. And so what does he do when he projects it out there? He goes and he sees objects that he's attracted to, but he's only projecting on these people, right? He gets into, right. So what happens is that when a person is dealing with all the things that they cannot handle, they have a tendency to project it onto the people around them. That makes sense? And so part of everything you part of everything you heard Tupac say was a direct extension of all the things that he couldn't handle in his life. He was projecting all the things that he couldn't handle in his life. He never accepted the role of Tupac the Gangster, and he hated that role. In fact, he despised the role. He wasn't even loyal to the role, but he was typecast and stuck in a role. Typecast and stuck. And all that anger is coming out. And the sad thing about it is when you argue with someone, there is no way, absolutely no way, that you won't be able to tell, that you can hide your secrets anymore. When you argue with someone, you are actually discharging unconscious, very intimate and unconscious details about the innermost workings of your life. So when you're arguing with someone, in order for you to have an argument with them, you have to project on them and you have to see yourself in them. But you see yourself in it in an unconscious manner. And because you cannot accept, because Tupac could not accept the failures that he had in his life, because he was locked into his lower self and had no more access to his higher self, he then projected anger and frustration out on everyone around him. And now, what are you doing? You are stomping someone down inside of a $1 billion hotel. I mean, you are at a professional fight. Everybody's dressed up and everybody's nice, and then you have to participate in stomping someone down. No, you projected your failures onto that gentleman, and you began to work on his chest and his back with your foot. So, and eventually, Tupac not understanding his shadow is eventually what resulted in his unaliving. Because when he created that situation, he didn't know it was going to wrap up within 15 minutes. So when he initiated that fight, and on the video, he's stomping someone's out, so the guy Orlando out, he didn't know that his time clock was going to end 15 minutes later, right? Now, there's something interesting about this. Something interesting about this too, that when Tupac's fight, it was like it's like a brawl, but not a fight. But when he was killed, remember all the people on the video. Let me go to this video here. Let me see if I can find this here. Okay, I think in here. So it shows them. Like everybody's going about their business, civility. And well, what is this? Okay, I think this is him right here. Yeah, I think it's him right there. Now look at this. Notice here's the thing. When you start dealing with unconscious people, right? You start to see the pattern. That's why I said that you should always record knocks, never break any privacy laws, but make sure you got the recorders going. Because when you go back and look at this sick behavior, you start to see how incongruent they are with the environment. Look at all now, look at all of these men jumping on one man, right? Now, probably 15 minutes later, when the guy comes back and he sort of murders, unalives him, where are all them? Where are they at? Right? So they do all of this. So that's another. See, that's another characteristic that Tupac, he was in the Truman Show. He thought that just because they were able to gang up on one person in a hotel where they had all the protection, they had the he was by himself, it's number, and they in a place with a lot of protection too. Well, really awful, um, awful. But you would have thought that someone would have stood for him after he was unalive, but none of the people here spoke up. Let me show you here. Let me see. Tupac. Let's say shooting. Let me see if I can. Okay. Is this the what? This can't be. What? Let me see. Oh, okay. So here's a parked car. Here's a car, and there's a car. Let me see here. Hmm. Let me see something here.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words,
an arrest has been made in connection with the shooting death of Tupac Shakur, the rapper's 1996.
With now, remember I did the go back and look at the show on. Um, okay, I guess that is the car. I guess that is the car. Yeah. Okay, go back and look at the episode on. They put him in the Truman Show, right? Okay, and I just talk about in these fake realities where you around unconscious people, nothing in reality is real, right? And so when you have the free, you see the friendships and the camaraderie amongst these people, that's only on surface. There's nothing behind it. Just like on the movie Truman Show, they everything. The bank was a facade. It was an office bank with people coming in, but behind the stage there was nothing but it was a set where people would go. And that's the same thing here. Even though there's camaraderie, that Tupac feels that there's camaraderie, there's loyalty, there's triumph, and all of his guys getting together and stomping this guy down. But it only happens there while the movie is going. However, in this situation, he's still with his entourage. Nobody gave chase. Nobody followed the vehicle. Nobody recorded nothing. Absolutely nothing. Everybody with him at that time remained completely silent. No one said anything. Not at all. Finito. Not one person spoke up for Tupac. All of those people he was with who said that, hey, we'll go ahead and whoop him down if you want to, but this is all theatrical stuff. This is stuff we see in the movie that happens on the movies. But when it comes to real life, we're not getting involved in that. That's not what we're for. Tupac didn't understand that. Remember, I was telling him that he's an actor, not a gangster. Gangsters only go places where they have control. They don't, so gangsters are always the only one with the gun. Because if things pop off, the gangster can always pull out the gun and start blasting to get out of the situation. But there's no gangster that's ever going to go anywhere around people with guns. Right? Period. And let alone them with a gun. It's not a fair fight. And gangsters want decisive visits. They want decisive victories, not just stomping people out putting them asleep for the weekend. So I think that's all I have today. For my podcast on narcissism is a network. Tupac in the shadow, and Tupac told all of his enemies everything they needed to do to unalive him. All of the talking, all of the banter, all the angers was nothing but him projecting and regurgitating all the issues that was bothering him and that he was stuck at. None of these issues were real issues. They were all created in his head. He was a multi-millionaire. He wasn't poor. He didn't need to live like that. He wanted to. He was locked into his lower self. And I suggest you learn more about that. Tupac is an actor. Take care, guys. Read out. Ciao.